Welcome to the Beautiful Step Podcast,
where we
run,
stomp,
tiptoe,
and tango into the confusing
but beautiful
world of togetherness. We are your hosts, Kris
and Charity.
Now, let's go make our together even better.
Hi, babe.
Hey, babe.
I like your paradise shirt.
You do? You bought it for me.
Mm-hmm. That's probably why I like it.
It's funky. It's cool.
It is cool.
It's like a night scene or something. No, a beach night.
A beach night scene in paradise.
Your shirt's cool. What?
Plain brown.
It's responsible.
Very responsible. That would define me pretty much.
It's pretty.
Hey, our shirts define us. You're like fun in paradise, and I'm like brown responsible lady.
I'm crazy guy with a weird shirt. I like it. Whatever.
So,
what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk today about stuff, the accumulation of stuff, and kind of our process in looking at failure.
Like letting it go?
Yeah, letting stuff go, but not really like from a consumerism standpoint. Because that's kind of boring.
Okay, well, I
that.
love stuff. You like stuff. You don't care about stuff.
I don't care about stuff as much as you do, but you do like stuff.
I like stuff. Well, I'm a gifts person.
Yes,
yeah.
And I am not.
No.
I'm.
One day we're going to tell the story about how I bought you a beautiful gift and you were like, what is this? Should we tell it now? No.
No.
Okay,
we'll tell it a different one.
Right,
We'll do a whole thing on gifts because
Giveaway.
that's a big one that people fight about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we are going to talk about is stuff though, because we had a little episode yesterday.
A little episode? You were fighting with me.
We tried to do a garage sale.
Oh.
And I say tried because we put everything out and then ended up putting everything back in before it started.
That was bad.
It was
We had
bad.
it all out there. The scene is me throwing stuff back into the garage and you driving off in the 1990 Toyota Highlander.
Because we just couldn't get there. We could not sell off the stuff. Okay, but let's talk about
I could sell it off. It was a lot deeper than that. Go.
Okay.
What?
So we're thinking about moving houses again. So we were like, let's
again.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of that the last couple of years. So we're like, this is kind of a lot. And we were going to sell off all the things we didn't really need to take with us.
Right.
So we'd agreed to this, but something had happened the day before when we were kind of getting ready for the garage sale. And you went up into the attic and there was a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, I started going through all the stuff that I brought with me from the last move.
Yeah.
And this is stuff that is so connected, and I hate this term, but I was triggered. I want to be bigger than being triggered, but I'm not. I was like, going through this stuff was super hard. I was seeing all of this old.
It was your old office stuff?
My old office stuff and just old like guitar, like weird, I mean, there was a lot of like old church me stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying church me stuff was bad. It was just a super hard season.
Yeah.
My mom's stuff is up there. I have like watercolors that people did with, my mom.
Yeah.
And it was just like.
So you were definitely triggered.
I was, yeah.
And I couldn't really figure out I could tell you were triggered, like, because I know something about you that is different than me, and that you connect things like possessions.
Yeah.
To life, to a season, and I think everybody does that to some extent, but
they're like relics or like trophies or like things I earned.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you do it with everything, even stuff you didn't earn, stuff you bought or whatever. It doesn't have to be sentimental. It's just that you actually tie things to life, and I do not.
Yeah, it's weird how you don't, though.
Okay, so I would say that every relationship, unless, maybe you're the same, but usually.
Don't try to get out of how weird it is that you can throw away the most sentimental things.
Don't give me cards. Don't get, I'm just not a sentimental
do you still have your wedding ring?
I do.
You promise?
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's there.
But it is one of those things where I will throw away, I'm not attached to things at all.
I think you're weird.
And I think you're weird that you want to keep everything. Like, I'm like,
yeah, okay,
we're never going to see this again or use this again.
Okay.
So usually, though, in a relationship, we have found in talking with people that one person is the thrower and that person pisses everybody who's the keeper away. Like the other person's the keeper.
I'm glad you didn't say hoarder.
Well, if you have two keepers in a relationship, you end
Dude.
up having a hoarder. You end up
Yeah.
being like, what's that? Is the TV show Hoarders?
It's something.
Yeah,
Yuck.
you end up having. So it's good that you always have at least one thrower.
There's supposed to be a balance.
There's supposed to be a balance.
I like it.
But it does cause a lot of fights. Over the years, it's caused a lot of
A lot of fights.
It's not just between you and me. My kids, our kids will get so upset if I throw things.
My sister was mad at you for a long time about a thing you threw away. Like you have, that's what I'm saying. Like you have gone through like a bull in a china shop and just thrown away some.
That's not really fair. I don't throw it away. I give it away. Like I'm not like trashing everything. I'll go donate it or something.
Yeah. Yeah. You just have this weird, inability to have sentimental thoughts or sentimentality towards any physical object. I can't say any physical object, but most.
Pretty much. I mean, I'm not attached.
Like guys will wear out a pair of jeans and they're so bad they can't wear them anymore. But for whatever reason, they're still in their closet.
Yeah, and I'm just like, no. As soon as it's done, is used up its life in my life, I'm done.
I have a pair of Carhartts that are like tissue paper.
Yeah,
but I can't throw them away.
I know, but it's beyond that. So you really attach to things, and they kind of take on their own representation in your life in that season.
Right.
And so when you saw those things and it reminded you of something, it was like it triggered you not just to remember that season, but for some reason you were really processing that season as a failure.
Well, think about it. So 2 things I've done in my life that I look back on, it's really hard for me to not look at as failures. One, I started a construction company that no longer exists, and I started a church that no longer exists. And so looking back, and I'm up there cleaning out tools that I've used in construction my whole life. And I've also I have my church office stuff up there. And I'm like, yeah, it was like bringing back this whole wave after wave of failure. Like, oh my goodness, I didn't build them to last. Like they didn't work out. And so I'm in this trigger / self-pity / sulk / PTSD / weird moment. And not to mention the fact that our attic is like, I think it's 900 degrees. Is it 900 or is it 9,900? Like it's.
So you're sweating while you're being.
Oh yeah, and then you come up, and you're telling me you want to take all of my stuff out of a certain dresser, and I should reorganize it somewhere else so that you can sell it as a bed set. And I'm like, it was just too much. I'm like. I'm not reorganizing my entire stuff, and I'm going through this, and I freaked out. I kind of went cold on you.
Yeah, you just couldn't do it all at once.
That's the hard part.
The all at once thing.
Yeah.
Like it was like, okay, I might be able to do this in stages.
Yes.
Over time.
Yeah.
But
it felt like I had to move today because we were getting ready for this garage sale. It felt like I had to do it all right now.
And so you responded in a really extreme way.
Well, I heard a guy, I may have mentioned this on a previous podcast, but I heard a guy talk about trauma, right? Like when you go through a season and it's so much for you that you don't have the emotional capacity to just process it all. And so there's parts of that season you just sort of go numb and you get through it. And then later, those feelings that you haven't dealt with come up. And it's like he was saying, it's like when a jet is about to break through the jet stream, and there's like this big cloud right in front of the nose of the jet, and right before it finally breaks through, it like boom, it breaks through, and like that was me upstairs. Like I was the jet, and I had this big cloud, and then something sort of broke, and I'm starting to feel all these old emotions that I just didn't quite have what it took to process because it was so heavy in the moment.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's some of that weird trauma stuff that happens. Or that was happening to me.
Yeah, which was really
right.
So we got to process through it because we looked at it and we were like, okay, what is this? And you were able to articulate. I think it's because I'm attaching it to failure. I think I'm having this response because I'm reliving failure right now.
Well, I kind of yelled at you about it. I think I was like, I remember saying like I kind of was yelling like, yeah, I come up here and this is thrown back in my face. Are you kidding me? All this stuff.
Yeah,
And like,
you did
and
say
I
that.
can't believe I'm going through this again. That's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
And you were just kind of like, I left you with no room.
You weren't really yelling at me. You were just articulating
out loud.
I'm mad because I'm having to re-go through
Right.
this failure or re-go. I think when people are suffering from things like this and they are like you and they're attached to things, anything that throws them back, they're going to relive that shame, the failure, the grief.
Oh, I was wallowing in it.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So we started to process it though a little bit later, and it was like, okay, this is why you're feeling this way. This is why you're acting this way.
No, let's go back to what you did, because you saved me. It was beautiful.
I did?
Yes, you honestly, the way that you finally responded. I mean, it took you a little while, but then when I came home after I went on that really long walk, I came home, and the words that really did heal me is you gave me a big hug, and you were like, man, that is a lot of loss.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, whoa, like, you're right, it's loss. And for that, like, in that moment, I was able to go, what if it wasn't failure?
Right.
What if it was just loss?
Yes.
Maybe I'm not a big failure. And the craziest part is when you did that paradigm shift for me, I was like, I instantly went into loss. So I'm like, oh, the natural response to loss is grief, whereas the natural response to failure is shame. Yes. And so here I am just like totally ashamed, and I'm not supposed to be, because it was just grieving a loss.
Yes.
Or grieving a lot of loss at once.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that was so helpful.
A lot of loss. Yeah.
And I wonder how many people are reliving their past, right?
Something happens and it comes up.
Yeah. They're telling themselves the story of their past.
Because we all have that narrative running of how it went.
The replay reel is awful sometimes.
Yeah. But I think what's helpful in the replay reel is if you actually stop and really are honest and say, I'm being really hard on myself right now and I'm calling it failure. And I'm not saying like make everything rosy when you replay it in your mind. That's not the reality.
Because you blow it sometimes.
Totally. But what if you could ask yourself the question, if I really had it to do different, would I actually do it different, or did I do everything I could do in the moment with what I had?
That's what I'm thinking. It's not like, because shoulda, coulda, woulda, that goes on all the time. But there is a thing where you go, like for me, in those moments, I was like, I couldn't have done those different. I really look back and I'm like, I shouldn't have done those different. And that was so healing. I was like, thank you. I'm grieving.
Yes.
I'm not ashamed of who I am and what I did in my life's journey, and the fact that, it was like,
because you got to look
that's
at
healthy.
Because you got to look at it as loss and ask yourself that question. And then I think the other thing besides asking yourself the question of like, what would I have done different? Really? Probably not all of it. Because if you look at the outcome of whatever the situation is, everyone looking at the outcomes of their choices and things that are a loss could point to the fact that either certain things needed to happen as a result of the loss.
Right.
Or relationships got better as a result of the loss.
There's always some fruit.
There's always some fruit from the loss. And so then you would go, well, if I'm going to say, I'm a logic person. So I'm like, well, if you're going to make the argument that was failure, then you have to say the side effects, the effects of that decision are failure. But if they don't line up as failure, if there was good outcomes, then you have to work your way back and say, then maybe my decision was not failure. Maybe it was loss of something so that something else could happen or something else could grow, or that simply I just needed to cut that thing or that person out of my life.
Yeah. And I think, okay, so this is the crazy part for me. The other part, I just love the way you open this world up for me, because the other part of it was like, wait a second. There's more ways to experience loss than just, oops, like, you know what I mean? Like, that didn't work out.
Oh.
But so what happened with me is I was reading, because I'm a religion major, which I'm very proud of, and I'm reading the Old Testament, and I'm reading it on religious hair, by the way. So it's really fun.
I love that
it's
you're doing
so
that.
good.
Yeah.
But I was reading this thing, and the commentator wasn't even about hair, but he was saying in Judaism, back in the sacrificial system, they said when any person wanted to go from one place, like from their past and their past either struggles or problems, into something new, a sacrifice had to be made.
Right.
And I was like, because it absolves them from sin and they can walk into the future. And so they would but what I took that as, it wasn't like I need to go find a goat and slit its throat and burn it.
Right.
What I was looking at was like, oh my goodness, those things that those losses were sacrifices. They were things that I gave up in order to become something even better. And that was so funny. You pointed it out. You were like, yeah, your construction company didn't work because you decided to be the greatest dad in the world that year.
And we couldn't run multiple companies at one time.
We couldn't. We just
be there for our kids.
We didn't have the bandwidth. And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. And
it wasn't taken.
I'm the most loved dad in the world.
Oh yeah. It wasn't taken from you. The loss was not something taken from you. It was actually, I'm laying this down.
Yes.
It's still a loss nonetheless. It's still something leaving. But there is a difference between something is taken and I'm laying it down. And I think the connection that maybe we don't always make when we're in the middle of grief is that we are the ones who chose to lay it down.
Yes.
We're still grieving the loss, and that's okay. But we can't act as if something was taken from us. That's the you're crossing over into delusion.
I like that.
When actually you say oh, woe is me, it was taken from you. And it's a disempowering thought.
Totally.
But when you're like, there's a loss, but actually I gave it up.
Right.
And it's still a loss. I still get to grieve the loss, but I don't get to blame anyone else for it. I got to choose that.
Yeah,
and that's empowering.
That's fully empowering because now you're in control of your life. Now, there's also loss where things are taken from you.
Yes.
And so that's a different type of grief and all that kind of thing. But it was really remarkable how that snapped me into this whole world of being like, oh, I actually chose my life.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I am a good guy. I have so much success, even though those were in many ways catastrophic losses.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a construction guy and you have a business, that's your identity. If you're a pastor and you have a church, that's your identity. I mean, there's so much of that's wrapped up.
It was the loss of your two major careers in your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, those are losses, but I'm not the narrative, the story that I need to remember. And actually the true story is I don't get to now go back and those were two catastrophic failures in my life. They were two catastrophic sacrifices that I made for something even better.
Yeah. So you're saying they're not failures.
They're losses.
They're losses.
But they were sacrificial losses, which was that's mind blowing. It's actually so healing.
Yeah.
Right.
And you would say, I think probably from both of those that your relationships got better, that you were able to do the things that you needed to do at the time to keep the rest of your life healthy and whole. And so again, if we're looking at the outcomes of what the loss is, we can't say that the loss was a bad thing.
No.
But it's still a loss.
It's still a loss.
And it still has to be processed.
Yep. And it has a lot of grief to it. And that's where you have to kind of pick up that, okay, well, how do I deal with grief? And we can do that another time. But I was just, man, that was a really cool, thank you.
But I think you actually said at the end of that conversation, after we kind of processed everything yesterday, you were like, I have decided that I'm just going to be able to, because I can't do it all at once. It's too much grief.
So I came up with this as I was writing. So writing is really good.
You really do well writing, with your
I need to
process.
If I
write
process,
it down.
it's so much better than a therapist or something. I think. I don't know. I've never been to a therapist. Have I?
Yes, you have.
I know. I grew up in therapy. But I will say that when I wrote it out, I realized, oh my goodness, this is what I need to do. It's very simple. And I would suggest this to people who maybe process like I do.
Yes.
I was like, okay, so what I need to do is starting tomorrow, because it was kind of late in the day, I need to let go of one thing in my past. Mm. Just one thing a day.
One physical thing, because you were tying that to...
Because there's and so I want to go upstairs and sell a set of speakers or something. From my
band days.
From my band, or an amplifier.
Yeah. From your guitar days. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't want to be a guitar day guy, but it's just that's the necessary sacrifice. And the thing is that's so crazy to me is I already know that as I sell those things and let go of my past, I'm going to be less cluttered in my spirit.
Yeah. Which is funny because you mentioned speakers and amplifiers. We have carried those speakers and amplifiers actually from the last 4 moves. I think we have those speakers and amplifiers are like 15 years old. We've carried them from house to house to house to house, and you haven't used them for probably the last 3 houses.
And I gave Cole all of the really like the actual, like, these are heirlooms.
Yeah.
These are pieces of art. And so, yeah, he's got those, but there's just dumb little stuff.
But
like,
you have old amplifiers that you built the cases on, and you have these things, and we may not get rid of those, but I think for you, I guess what I'm bringing out is that the process sometimes can be really long, and that you might have to drag things with you for a while before you're ready to like not attach that thing to your life anymore.
That's an aphorism right there that shoots in so many different directions. They're so right. You sometimes just have to carry that baggage until you're able and have the capacity to let it go. And I know, like, you would love to be like, oh, dude, get a bulldozer.
Yeah.
I could do this in 10 minutes, baby.
I'd be
And
like,
I'm the new me going forward. And
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, no, I have to do it systematically, one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like I have to like lay it down and pet it and everything and then cry over it and be like, okay, time for you to go. Like, I don't know, bird, fly, but that's just the way that I process.
And it's really good for me to understand that about you, and to like, I was able to make a connection yesterday that I wasn't able to have, in 27 years, I haven't really made. Like, I think because I kind of viewed it as weakness. Like, why is he attached to all these things? It's just so stupid that we have to carry this to the next house.
And here's the thing that, let me jump in, because what happened is I'm like, it does feel a little bit weak. It feels like I should be able to handle this all at once. And so you adding your ability to, just kind of bulldoze, and then me coming up and going, no, I need to like sort of walk through this step by step. I started to realize, oh, wait, I get a choice right there to go, is this something that I don't like about myself? Or is this just the way that I am? And I'm like, you know what? I kind of like this about myself because I'm able to like really care for the stuff that I have. Like, that's a big deal to me.
Well, because of this, you're able to pass on sentimental things to your children, where I'm like
a historian, dude.
Yeah, where our kids, they get mad at me about that because they're like, Mom, you threw away that thing that I've been wanting to
The only thing they're getting from you is a life insurance policy. That's it.
But they'll get a lot of.
I know they will get it. Yeah. But I was like, wait a second, and I think that's a great point that you bring up, because you did view it as weakness, and I sensed that you viewed it as weakness.
Wow.
I'm
sorry. Yeah, I didn't understand.
But I'm like, it's actually a really cool feature of my personality.
Yes.
And I'm like, I don't know, why don't I look at it that way? Why don't I tell the story of me that way?
Why don't we change that narrative?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it helps me to go like, oh, okay, I understand now. It's not really stuff, and it's not just about like keeping things or hoarding things. It's about like, there's a sentiment to this, and it's a valuable thing, and it's a valuable trait.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he's sentimental about things, and so I can let that go and realize that like we may have to carry it longer than I want to carry it.
Right.
But like, it doesn't matter if I want to carry it or not. Like,
right.
We're carrying it together, and it's like, when the time comes, that thing will fall off.
Right.
Or we'll keep carrying it.
And I just want to say one last thing about the way that people process, because we went to an estate sale the other day.
Yeah.
And it was in our neighborhood, and we walked through the place, and we were blown away at the stuff these people left. They sold their house, and they were like, you can have everything in it, to an estate, what do they call that? Estate dealership, whatever, a guy who comes in and he deals with
these people had traveled the world, and there was like crazy stuff from all over the world.
Everywhere.
Art pieces, like beautiful. They clearly,
like, how do you walk away from this?
Gorgeous antiques. They clearly had collected a lot of
and they
things.
Clearly had a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, there was family pictures on the wall.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what though? I was like, oh my goodness, sometimes people just need to make a clean break. You know what I mean?
Walk away.
Sometimes that's the way people process, where they're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm okay, world, stop now. I'm getting off. And it's like, okay, but I'm not like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I just wanted to mention that the way that I'm doing this is really, idiosyncratic. It's like the way that I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I like that about myself. But if someone does it different, dude, thumbs up.
And man, in relationships, in partnerships, it's so key that we actually honor how the other person is processing loss, because everybody's going to process it very different. And it's the easiest thing to judge about another person is how they process loss or how they process all sorts of things. But like loss in particular, because we're so different, can be a really easy thing to either make a weak or strong issue or a, like all sorts of things. And you just can't moralize it like that. It's just the way that we all are going to process.
Right. My brother-in-law, one of the sweetest people I know. I just love him. He made a huge faux pas with my sister. We were all talking about it. It was so funny. Well, it was kind of sad, but it was funny at the same time because my sister's crying about my mom dying.
This is your brother-in-law who's married to your sister.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And he was and he was trying to comfort her, and he was like, this is the way I read the story. He was trying to comfort her. He was like, "It's okay, babe. It's been a whole year." Kind of like, you should feel better. And she literally got out of the car and started running like, "How dare you?" But
we're laughing, but that's not funny. I mean, those are the kind of things that happen.
Right. And I was just reading in a religious practice was even back in, I think it was Judaism, where it was somewhere in the Bible, right, where they were saying people who have experienced the loss should go and shave their heads, and they should, because it's a sign of like change, right? It's a sign of like,
right.
And then it's a sign,
when they were in tremendous grief, they would shave their heads, sackcloth.
It's a sign ashes. To tell everyone, dude, handle that person with, because they're grieving, obviously, because they're shaved their eyebrows and stuff like that.
Or when women used to wear like all black when they were in grief for like a year or whatever, however long it was that happened.
So these are like signals to the world, right? Like, I'm grieving right now.
Wow.
I know, it's pretty interesting. And then, but I was reading on and it was like, and then they send someone over to you 30 days later, and they trim your nails and they kind of like put you back together and everything. And they give you like, like clothing to wear and everything. Like, okay, now time to get back to work. And I was like, that would never work for me. 30 days. Like,
yeah, but I really love that concept that there was an external thing that everyone else could look at and say, this person's still in the middle of grief. We don't get that. No. And because we don't get that, oftentimes we look at each other, we think, oh, they're okay. They're working, their life is working. They don't seem to be, nothing seems to be wrong. They don't seem to be in grief, but we don't see that side. We don't see the black dress. We don't see the shaved head. And so we can easily hurt each other in that process by not understanding that the person is still really in that stage of grief.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Man, that's super helpful. And if you ever die, me and my boys, I'm sure, are going to shave our head and probably our eyebrows. So don't die, because it'll look awful. I like my hair. I still have a little bit of hair.
Do Hare Christians shave their eyebrows? No?
I haven't gotten that far in the chapter.
Okay, well.
I don't think they do. Anyway, okay, well, let's sum it up. Just give me are we done? I think that's good.
I think it's done.
That was good.
Yeah. It's good to process. It's good to process loss and understand the difference between loss and failure.
Yeah, and be careful that you're not processing loss as failure.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was a big, I'm going to be really careful in the future for that.
Yeah.
And I think in this case, I love that idea of like, wait, this was a sacrificial loss. Mm-hmm. This is something that I gave up.
It's a good perspective.
Yeah.
You have to keep the empowering thought and be honest. It is untruthful to blame someone else for a loss that you caused and you were saying, I sacrificed for. That's untruthful. It's unfair.
Yeah.
And so be truthful to yourself, which is the most empowering thing.
That's so empowering. Yeah. I love it. Okay.
Yeah. Love you.
Love you. And thanks for that enlightenment. That was really helpful. Wait, babe, wait. How do we end this?
By saying thank you.
Okay, you guys are awesome. Thank you. There's nothing more encouraging than you hitting that like button and commenting.
And don't forget to subscribe.
And I know there's more. You have a list. Might as well go down the list.
Right. Okay. Watch the video of this podcast on our Beautiful Step YouTube channel or on our website, where you can actually download transcripts and show notes of the episode. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
If today's episode made your together even better, tell someone.
Okay, now.
Right now.
Today.
Okay.
You can take one step.
It's just one step
Toward the beautiful relationship you want in your life.
You got this.